Adam simply translates to man, but after Cain kills Abel, Eve would give birth to another child named Seth, which means appointed. But then Seth has a child, and he named him Enosh, which means mortal. Of course, Enosh has a child, and he named him Kenan. Kenan actually translates to sorrow, but then Kenan fathers Mahalalel, which means the blessed God, who then has a child named Jared. His name means to descend or to come down. But one day, Jared has a child named Enoch, which conveniently means teaching. Then Enoch has a child named Methuselah. His name, interestingly, means his death shall send. But then Methuselah has a boy. His name is Lamech, which means the despairing, before Lamech finally begets Noah, whose name means rest and comfort. See, if we put all of these names together, ultimately what we get is a prophecy. This is what it says: man appointed, mortal sorrow, but the blessed God shall come down, teaching. His death shall bring the despairing rest and comfort. Can you imagine what we'd be capable of today if we were adapted to this type of atmosphere? I mean, we find these fossils of towering dinosaurs with massive insects, but after the flood, it seems like life just gets smaller and smaller. You see, one huge reason why things were so big once upon a time is because there was way more oxygen in the air back then. This would have affected absolutely everything in the earth in those days. See, oxygen also has this most interesting effect on humans. After a dose of highly oxygenated air, humans just seem to operate better. Increases in strength, stamina, recovery, focus are instantly felt. You would just not get tired. You'd sleep less. You could run for miles without even breaking a sweat. You could jump higher than any one of us could possibly even dream of. After breathing in pure oxygen, you'd be able to hold in your breath for unnatural amounts of time. Life on Earth would straight up look like an Avengers movie. After the flood, the people of Earth started building this tower. They wanted it to reach to the heavens. But my question is, why was this so wrong? Well, it had everything to do with their mindset at the time. In those days, the whole world spoke the same language, and soon enough, they had set their minds on building this great city. They wanted to make a name for themselves, or else they would be scattered across the face of the earth. But there was this problem. You see, the Tower of Babel was founded in the plains of Shinar, and the one who started this whole construction was a man named Nimrod. Not only was he king over Babylon, Akkad, Uruk, Shinar, and Calneh, but he was also known as this mighty warrior on the earth, which leaves a ton of speculation, making people wonder if Nimrod was actually a Nephilim. Now, this is completely unconfirmed, but the point is this: with the whole world unified and speaking the same language, nothing would be impossible for them. These people had just come out of an apocalypse, so it seems like the only reason why they built this tower was to be able to stand against God's judgments, like a giant flood. But here's what just blows my mind. God seems to agree with this idea, that nothing would be impossible for us. This is why he decided to confuse our language, because it seems like he knows something that we don't, which is that a unified people is the strongest force on the earth. Moses is a most interesting character in the Bible. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam all seem to have deep ties with this one man. I mean, like it or not, but Moses is the author of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and even Deuteronomy. See, once upon a time, God sends Moses up to this blazing mountain. This is where he receives his 10 commandments. But it was that same exact mountain where he also receives the histories of the world. He is the one who first gets told about the story of creation. Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah. These are all stories that have been passed down by Moses. It is because of him that we now get the very first books of the Bible. So why is he so special? Welcome to Egypt in 1391 BC. There is a new king in town. Fierce and determined to maintain his position, he was actually worried that his army of slaves would eventually overtake him. So what he does next is actually so gruesome that I can't even explain it on this app. But to make a long story short, Moses would be one of the only male babies to survive in his time. You see, after being found by royalty, he ends up growing up in the palace as Prince of Egypt. A prince even though he was born of slaves in his own kingdom. Because of this, his guilt leads him on this epic quest bestowed onto him by God. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of a man and a message. Let my people go. It truly was a scandal what Moses had just done. After killing an Egyptian who was harshly treating a slave, the hottest topic of the year was Prince Moses now wanted and permanently banned from Egypt. This news would shake the whole world to its core. And as for Moses, he must now flee in the scorching heat of the great African desert. As time goes on, he meets this family. To make a long story short, he marries their daughter. It was indeed their happily ever after until one day, everything changes. Moses, tending to his flock, stumbles on a most amazingly curious sight. Right in front of his eyes was a burning bush on fire, but not burning. I mean, you could feel the heat radiating off of this thing. The bush was on fire, but not being consumed. Of course, Moses can't help himself but to get closer. But as he lifts his foot to take a step, a voice like rolling thunder emerges from the fire. God, the Creator himself, has called out to Moses. See, at that time, God needed an ambassador. He needed to accomplish something very difficult, and the only person who was fit for the job was Moses. After the Israelites fell into slavery, God now needed an envoy who would deliver his people from the Egyptian oppression. And Moses, being ex-prince of Egypt, was perfect for this role. Now, because of how difficult this would all be, God gives Moses the ability to perform miracles. I mean, we've all heard of people wielding magic and sorcery, but Moses would be granted the ability to wield God's power. But not only that, God also reveals to Moses a whole bunch of plagues coming for Egypt unless the Israelites are let go. So armed with supernatural powers and prophecies of coming disasters, Moses is determined to answer God's call, "Let my people go." Now, Adam had an interesting appearance. Not only was he created in the image of God, but I think his skin was actually glowing with light. Interestingly, after Moses gets the 10 Commandments, the Bible describes his face to also be shining brightly. So brightly that all the Israelites were literally afraid of him. But this makes me wonder, what if this just happens from simply being in the presence of God? And if so, then what about Satan? If Satan disguises himself as an angel of light, then what could this mean? Well, in the book of Job, there's this specific story which just absolutely blows my mind. It speaks of this heavenly courtroom where Satan can literally address God himself. In this case, he is the accuser, almost like a lawyer, except this guy is pure evil. See, it really seems like Satan still has this kind of political influence in heaven. Because strangely enough, even after Moses had died, the Bible speaks of this duel between Satan and the archangel Michael. Only in this duel, they were fighting over the body of Moses, which, of course, begs the question, why? After you die, you'd think you just end up in heaven forever. But biblically, that's not exactly true. There's this current heaven, but this isn't actually our final destination. See, at the end of time, there will be this new heaven and a new earth, which the Bible calls New Jerusalem. And the question is, what will this even look like? Well, on this new earth is this cubed city made of pure gold. 12,000 stadia in height, width, and length. Now, I did the calculations, and it turns out this comes from the ancient Greeks. One stadia would be around 185 meters. So, doing the math, this area would come to around 11 billion kilometers cubed. This city would be large enough to comfortably fit 200 quadrillion people. You see, there are these walls made of pure jasper. They are 66 meters thick, and this is what jasper looks like. In each direction are these 3 gates made of a single pearl, with an angel guarding each gate. The streets are made of this crystal clear, pure gold, and the very foundation of this place is decorated with every kind of precious stone. Now, interestingly, there won't be any sun or moon, because God himself will be our light. You see, my Father's house has many rooms, and this is what awaits us one day. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New Jerusalem. Hell is the most terrifying thing in the Bible, yet there isn't actually that much known about it. So today, I'm left with one burning question. What does hell even look like? See, there's hell, and then there's the lake of fire. And hell is actually more of a holding place, a place of torment where the evil are rather waiting for their final destination. And that place is called the lake of fire. Now, most imagine this place to be a fiery lake of molten lava, but this is where we got it all wrong. You see, the lake of fire is described with fire and brimstone, but brimstone is this element called sulfur. When you burn sulfur, you actually get this bluish color, making the lake of fire a whole lot darker. But also, ridiculously toxic. A soul here would not only have to deal with the flames, but also with the impossible challenge of breathing. Each breath would smell and taste like chemicals, all while the body begs for annihilation. But no one has to go here. In fact, this place was never even meant for humans. It all comes down to accepting the free gift of salvation through Jesus. The only issue is that nowadays, this is a whole lot harder than it seems. There are only 2 holy angels mentioned in my Bible, but in a Catholic Bible, they can actually name 3, which is curious because they mention this angel named Raphael, who claims that there are a total of 7 holy angels. So I pulled out my study tool because the question is, who even is Raphael? And according to Haven, this all comes from a book named the Book of Tobit, which a humble Protestant like me has never seen before. This story is about a man named Tobit. He ends up going blind because, I kid you not, a bird poops in his eye. Naturally, this made him very depressed, so he asks God to just take his life. But there was a problem. Tobit remembers that he had left money in this place called Media, and since he's blind, he has to send his son Tobias to go and get it. Of course, God sees this and sends an angel to go and help him out. Raphael is told to go with Tobias on his long journey there, except Raphael is an angel, but Tobias doesn't know this. So eventually, when they find this fish, Tobias is strangely told to cut out its heart, liver, and gallbladder. Apparently, this would be used for the deliverance of his father, but also a woman. See, this woman was named Sarah. She had 7 husbands, all pass away because of this demon named Asmodeus. Yet Tobias is told to marry this woman anyways, because he has the power to do an exorcism with these fish organs. He gets rid of this demon by burning the fish organs on some hot coals. He then marries Sarah and retrieves his father's money. And once he returns home, he even heals his father's blindness with the fish's gallbladder, until in an instant, Raphael reveals who he truly is, scaring the crap out of everybody in that room. But this is where it gets super interesting, because apparently, according to Raphael, he is 1 out of 7 holy angels, yet I've only heard of 2, Michael and Gabriel. So now the question is, who are these 4 lost angels? Michael is this most curious archangel in the Bible. He's actually 1 out of only 2 angels mentioned in this entire book. But interestingly, it never mentions him having any wings, even though this is like mainstream knowledge. Michael is only ever described as this prince. See, after doing some research on Haven, which by the way is this Bible study app I use for research, you should definitely go and check it out sometime. It turns out that he's actually the leader of heaven's armies. Not only does he lead this heavenly war against Satan, but he's also been assigned as the protector of Israel. Now, Gabriel is actually the first angel ever mentioned. He's kind of like a mailman because his main duty is to deliver messages, but he's also the one who announces the very birth of Jesus. According to Daniel, he looks just like a man. And again, he's never been described to have any wings. Apparently, he stands in the presence of God. Yet, interestingly, the Bible never calls him an archangel. This piece actually comes from the book of Enoch, which leads me to Lucifer, who was also an angel. But this is where it gets really strange, because even though we call the devil Lucifer, the truth is that's never actually been his official name. This all comes from the book of Isaiah, and this whole time, it was only describing this fallen king of Babylon. Lucifer actually just means bearer of light, and today, we've applied this name to the devil. But the reason why is because we see this as a great metaphor that rather describes the devil. One of the most mysterious characters in the Bible has to be King David's mighty men. See, when David had just started his kingdom, he actually ends up gathering his most elite super soldiers, and one of them was called Adino. Now, he was this chief among captains because he literally killed 800 people in one fight. This is what 800 people looks like, and he would have only had blades or arrows. But then there's this guy named Abishai, who killed 300 men all by himself. But the reason why this is just ridiculous is because he did all of that with a spear. Then there's just this guy named Eleazar, and he actually fought with David himself, but during this same battle, Eleazar's hands would end up getting stuck to his sword. You see, there are only two possible reasons for why this could have happened. Either his hands cramped up so incredibly hard that he couldn't let go of his sword, or there was actually just that much blood during this battle that it literally glued his hands shut. This would be called coagulation. But here's my problem though. I mean, yes, these guys were truly savage fighters, but how loyal were they to King David? Well, then we hear about this one story when King David simply wants a glass of water from Bethlehem. But the problem is that Bethlehem is currently occupied by the enemies. So after 3 of these mighty men learn about this, they literally break through the enemy camps in Bethlehem simply to draw water from the local well. These were men that would risk their entire lives just so their king could have a glass of water. Jonah was probably swallowed by a huge whale. Problem is that the Bible simply calls this creature a great fish, and interestingly, whales aren't actually considered to be fish. So the question is, what could have possibly swallowed Jonah in the Bible? Well, it turns out that a great fish in Hebrew is actually something much more generic. Great fish could mean literally almost any sea creature. But Jonah was thrown overboard in the Mediterranean Sea, and fortunately, there are only very specific types of fish that actually live there. Now, the largest fish in the Mediterranean is the baskin shark. These can grow up to 10 meters in length, but they definitely couldn't swallow a whole human. You would need a much bigger esophagus. And for that, really the only option you have left is whales. The largest whales in the Mediterranean are the fin whale and the sperm whale. The fin whale wouldn't be able to actually swallow because of its small esophagus. So now, all you have left is the sperm whale. Not only does the sperm whale actually live in the Mediterranean Sea, but they actually have an esophagus that can be up to 2 feet in diameter. This could easily swallow a whole human. And conveniently, the sperm whale is actually known for swallowing their prey whole. See, Jonah was swallowed and then vomited back out onto dry land. And what's actually just mind-blowing is that sperm whales are also known for their vomiting. They produce this substance called ambergris, which is literally used for perfumes and cosmetics. This is the same calendar that Jesus would have used. See, the Jews believe that this is the year 5784, which is based off of how many years has passed since the creation of the world. See, this is arguably God's calendar, but the question is, how does it work? Well, first of all, the way they track time is with these cycles. 1 month is exactly 1 full moon cycle. This means that each month starts with a new moon and doesn't end until its moon cycle is complete. Now, weirdly enough, nighttime also isn't really a thing. Every day begins at sundown. So, at sunset, or if you can see the very first 3 stars appear in the night sky, then you know that yesterday has passed and a new day has already started. See, our calendars today follow a 12-month Gregorian format, which is based off of the sun. Muslims also have a 12-month calendar, which is based off of the moon. But the Jews have a 12-month calendar, which is based off of both. This creates this interesting effect where every 2 to 3 years, they'll have a leap year with 13 months. After the flood, when Noah gets off of his ark, he actually commits one of the most common sins known to man. You see, as soon as he lands the ark in the mountains of Ararat, Noah just ends up getting blackout drunk. Now, if the most righteous man on the entire planet would do such a thing, then my question is, what other sins did biblical characters commit? Well, there's actually this one time in the book of Exodus which has everything to do with Moses. After he grew up in this mighty palace in Egypt, Moses literally ends up murdering somebody. Even though he was one of the most righteous men on the earth at that time, Moses would blatantly kill a fellow Egyptian right before running away from his own kingdom, which worked out perfectly, actually, because this is exactly what launched his glorious ministry. Now, King Solomon is a very curious one, because all while being the wisest king in the Bible, King Solomon was literally drowning in sexual immorality. The Bible literally says that he had 1,000 wives and concubines, which is very interesting, because most people think that God was just completely fine with it. But it is very clear throughout this entire book that God was absolutely not. But this leads me to King David, who literally cheated on his multiple wives with this girl called Bathsheba. Even though most people have already heard about this, it turns out that this gets so much darker. Because not only was Bathsheba already married, she was married to one of King David's mighty men. These were his very best fighters who would give up their entire lives in a split second for their king. What's really messed up is that after she finds out that she's pregnant and tells King David, David now kills her husband by sending him to the front lines of a brutal war. See, this was an absolutely terrible sin. Unexcusable. But here is also where you can find one of the greatest hopes known to man. Even after all of these horrific acts, God still forgave him, and David was still used mightily as a man after God's own heart. Now, King Solomon was a straight-up genius. Rumor has it that he was actually so smart that even kings, governments, and literally the occult still use his knowledge to this very day. Of course, the question is, what did he even teach? Well, according to Solomon, the very beginning of wisdom itself is this thing called the fear of the Lord. This is never meant actually being scared of God, but rather having this deep respect and holy reverence for the creator of the universe. We've all heard pride comes before a great fall, but the real question is, why is this even true? This will only make sense with the very first key of wisdom. You absolutely must first fear the Lord. So sit down and be humble. Solomon also warns about receiving advice from a specific group of people. He calls them sinners, but there's a lot more to this. See, a sinner can be rich and powerful, even a solution to all your problems, but their minds are separated from God, blind to the reality of this world. And if the blind lead the blind, then they will both fall into a ditch. And so, wisdom, according to Solomon, is like a woman. She calls out your name, waiting for your response. Only if you ignore her, eventually, she will leave, mocking your downfall, laughing at what you've missed out on. Only a fool builds their house without a solid foundation. So in this way, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. The greatest mystery in the Bible is the location of the Ark of the Covenant. Almost everyone says it's simply been lost. So today, my question is simple. Where is the Ark of the Covenant? You see, the Ark was safely stored inside of Solomon's temple. And one day, after the Babylonians destroy everything, it quite literally just vanishes. But here are the main theories. It's possible that the priests and temple authorities simply hid it somewhere, and it might still be hidden, but this is where the next theory comes in. Because it's also possible that it was then found by this group called the Knights Templar, this Catholic order. But here's the problem. There is absolutely zero evidence for this. And this is what leads me to the Ethiopians. Because the only place that seriously claims to have the Ark of the Covenant is the Ethiopian Church. They believe that about 400 years before the Babylonian conquest, Solomon himself had delivered the Ark to the Ethiopians. But the problem is, no one's actually seen this with their own eyes. And they won't let you see it even if you wanted to, giving this mystery no solutions and zero answers. But it couldn't have just disappeared, right? It has to be somewhere on this earth. So once again, I ask you, where could the Ark of the Covenant possibly be? It truly is a mystery what happened to Jesus when he was young. We know for sure he went to Egypt at some point, but the question is, what did he actually spend his time doing? There is a ton of speculation about him going to India, but all of this stuff has zero evidence and isn't even found in the Bible. You see, we only get two more pieces of information. One was he was a carpenter, so he probably practiced making things out of wood in his youth. But another piece is actually a story found in Luke 2. You see, every year, Jesus' parents would go up to Jerusalem for the Passover festival, and it wasn't until he was 12 that he could finally come with them. But after this festival, as everyone was returning home, Jesus had stayed back in Jerusalem without his parents knowing this. They literally traveled a full day before realizing their son was not with them, and after a slight panic, they returned to Jerusalem, only to find Jesus in the temple court, sitting among teachers. He was listening and asking questions, but blowing the minds of everyone there. The boy seemed to have a deep understanding about the scriptures, something completely uncommon for his age. Not only were his questions on point, but his actual responses seemed to come from some kind of higher wisdom. See, when his parents find him there, they say, "Son, why are you treating us like this? We've been looking for you everywhere." And then Jesus is like, "Why? Don't you know this is my Father's house?" Yeah, nobody knew what he was talking about. But it seems like even in his youth, he knew exactly where he came from, which to me is mind-blowing. Because now the question is, what other amazing things had Jesus done in his youth that we simply don't know about? After Jesus gets baptized, he goes into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. See, it has been 40 days since Jesus has eaten anything, so Satan would approach him, daring him to turn these stones into bread. But as his stomach was literally eating itself from the inside out, Jesus replies that a man does not live by bread alone. Now, Satan, who was completely unbothered by this, brings Jesus up to the top of the holy temple, and he says, "If you really are the Son of God, then throw yourself down from this building and let the holy angels catch you." But after gazing upon the city below, Jesus turns to the old snake and says, "Do not test the Lord your God." See, now, in his growing frustration, Satan brings Jesus up to a high mountain to show him all the kingdoms of the world, and he whispers, "This can all be yours. I will give this all to you if you only bow down to me." Then Jesus, having enough of this mockery, commands Satan to get away from him, because it is written that you shall only serve the Lord your God. See, now Satan finally realizes that this was a lost cause, so he retreats back into the wilderness. You see, we've all been in that same wilderness, surrounded by temptation, and the only thing that truly cuts through the trials of the devil is the Word of God. After unlocking this very old cellar, they revealed this truly shocking discovery of black biblical characters. And this news has gone viral in America. But the problem is, this isn't new at all. There's actually this whole sector of Jews and Christians who believe that the true Israelites were all black. They believe that God's true people moved to Africa, who then ended up getting sold into slavery. There is really one main reason why some people think this. Because of this mysterious prophecy. A prophecy that foretold the scattering and oppression of the Israelites for disobeying God. In this theory, the realization of this prophecy would be the African slave trade. A lot of people do actually argue that Jesus simply had to be black. Because remember, his parents fled to Egypt, and Egypt is in Africa. But according to my research, Egyptians in that time weren't really that black. They were mostly light brown, and some were black. So now just one question remains. What skin color did Jesus really have? Well, a bunch of scientists have actually already come together to try and reconstruct what Jesus would have looked like. And this is what they came up with. See, Jesus would have looked a little bit more like me, except more handsome. It literally says in Revelation 1:15 that Jesus' feet are like glowing bronze. See, Jesus wasn't white or black, and the Bible doesn't even speak on this, and honestly, probably for good reason. This is how the disciples were executed, and it was absolutely horrifying. Now, Peter was actually crucified upside down in Rome. See, when they told him he was going to be executed by crucifixion, he literally requests to be hung upside down because he believed he wasn't worthy to die in the same way as Jesus. Bartholomew was literally skinned alive. That is supposed to be his skin right here. Now, James, the son of Zebedee, was beheaded. Philip was straight up crucified. We think Matthew was either stoned, beheaded, or burnt alive. Thomas was stabbed to death, and that is the spear in question here. Jude was beaten with either a stick or an axe. John the Baptist never actually got killed, but he would survive multiple attempts on his life. James, son of Alphaeus, was actually stoned to death. Simon was either crucified or sawn in half. Lastly, Judas. Well, Judas hung himself. See, they thought they could silence them. They really thought they could just kill off Christianity. But for what they had meant for evil, ultimately spread this message all over the world. These are the most common biblical names and what they actually mean. Now, Michael has to be one of the very best names. Not only is it my name, but it's also the name of the most famous angel of all time. You see, it's been given to the archangel Michael, who, according to the Bible, is the very protector of Israel. The thing is, Michael is originally a Hebrew name, so technically, you should be pronouncing it as Michael. What it actually means is, who is like God, or gift from God. So every time you say the name Michael, you are actually praising God. Now, Daniel is another originally Hebrew name, and it turns out that you would actually pronounce it as Daniel. See, this name became so popular because it was given to one of the 4 great prophets, Daniel. And now there's at least 100 different ways that you can spell or pronounce it. What it means is, God is my judge, or judge of God. So if your name is Daniel, better watch out. Now, the name Peter is actually a very interesting name. It quite literally means rock or stone, and in case you didn't know, when Jesus said, "Upon this rock I will build my church," he was in fact talking about Peter, whose name comes from the Greek word Petros, which again, conveniently, means rock. Now, the name Judas is actually quite strange. See, this name is actually a Greek version of the Hebrew name Judah, which actually means praise or praised. Believe it or not, but this was actually an extremely popular name among Jewish men until, Judas betrayed Jesus. But here's the interesting part. Judas's full name was Judas Iscariot, but nobody seems to know for sure what Iscariot even means. Some scholars think that it means man from Carioth, but others think it connects with the Latin Sicarius, which could mean that Judas was a fanatical, nationalistic, armed rebel, or a zealot, which is another story for another time. This is what God has to say about 7 types of Christians, at least according to the book of Revelation. Now, for the lukewarm church, God doesn't honor you for anything. You think that you are rich and that you need nothing, but God says that you are spiritually broke. He advises you to buy real gold paid for through fiery trials. Those who are victorious will have the right to sit with him on his throne. Now, to the compromised church, God knows that you dwell where Satan's throne is, and he knows that you still won't deny his name. But God has this one thing against you, that you think that you can just live a life of sin and compromise. But these are the teachings of Balaam, and God says to repent. Now, to the corrupt church, God actually commends you for your works, your love, your faithfulness. Nevertheless, he has a few things against you. You allow the spirit of Jezebel to deceive the church, leading people into corruption and immorality. To you, God says, repent. Now, for the dead church, the Lord says he knows all your deeds, but they haven't been complete in his sight. Your hearts have become as empty as your prayers, so wake up, or he will come like a thief in the night. For the apostolic church, God truly commends you for your hard work, but he is rather concerned that you have abandoned your first love. God warns you to repent, or he will remove you from your place in heaven. Now, to the persecuted church, the Lord is inspired by your endurance. He has seen your poverty while you remain spiritually rich. See, some of you will be thrown into prisons and trialed by devils, but God strongly advises you to be faithful even unto death. Do this, and he will give you the crown of life. And lastly, but definitely not least, to the faithful church, the Lord knows that you have little strength. But because you kept his commandments, God promises that he will make your enemies bow at your feet. He will keep you from the hour of great tribulation, but until then, he urges you to guard your crown, because he who overcomes will become a pillar in God's new temple. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the book of Revelation. John the Apostle was this man who saw the end of the world. After he was exiled to the island of Patmos, God calls him by name, telling him to write down a vision of the apocalypse. He sees this scroll that only Jesus was worthy to open. It had these 7 seals, and each seal represented a specific event that absolutely had to take place before the end of the world. Now, as the very first seal is opened, this mighty white horse with a mysterious rider appears right before him. This rider held a bow and he had a crown. And he went out with only one goal in mind: to conquer. See, immediately after this, Jesus opens the second seal, and this fiery red horse appears. Its rider had a great sword, and he was granted to take peace from the whole world. And now Jesus opens the third seal. A black horse, as dark as night, comes forth. This rider had a scale in hand, and as he rides out, poverty and famine will grip the world. Prices of very basic things like wheat become unaffordable because this rider brings utter economic collapse. Now the fourth seal would bring out this pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and he was accompanied by Hades. He was given power over a fourth of the earth to kill through sword, famine, plagues, and wild beasts, which leads us to the fifth seal. John sees all the souls of the martyrs. They are patiently waiting for God to avenge them. Now once the sixth seal is open, the sun turns pitch black. The moon turns into blood red while an earthquake displaces every single island and every single mountain. At this point, John sees stars falling down to earth, causing every man and every woman to hide themselves in caves and mountains. Now we get to the last seal. Once this seal is opened, there's just silence in heaven for half an hour. You see, all of this was only a precursor of what is to come. After 7 seals come 7 trumpets, and with each trumpet blast come chaos and disasters. Now, I think it's fair to say that we have front row seats to the apocalypse. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the revelation of things to come. The apocalypse will begin at the sound of a trumpet. 7 angels will have 7 mighty trumpets that release disasters upon the world. You see, at the very first trumpet blast, hail and fire mixed with blood will rain down on the earth. 1/3 of all the grass and all the trees will be completely burnt up, leaving behind a partly scorched earth. On the second trumpet blast, something like a burning mountain was thrown into the sea. 1/3 of all the oceans will become like blood, and 1/3 of all living creatures in the sea will die. You see, the ocean will become completely desolate, leaving 1/3 of all ships utterly destroyed. This leads us to the third trumpet, when a great star falls down from heaven. Its name was wormwood, and as it falls onto 1/3 of all rivers and all springs, 1/3 of water becomes poisonous, leading to mass dehydration. And then the fourth trumpet sounds. 1/3 of the sun, the moon, the stars are struck, causing partial darkness during the day and pitch black darkness during the night. And then the fifth trumpet sounds, and this fallen angel is given this key which opens up the bottomless pit. And when he does, this toxic black smoke comes rushing out of this hole, darkening the sun and the sky. You see, then these locusts will emerge from the smoke with scorpion-like powers, and they will be commanded to torment anybody who doesn't have the seal of God. You see, this torment is described to be like the sting of a scorpion, except the pain lasts for 5 months. In those days, people will seek death, but it shall not be given to them. Now, once the sixth angel sounds his trumpet, this mighty voice commands the release of 4 angels bound under the river Euphrates. These angels will lead a ridiculous army, killing 1/3 of mankind. This army will have 200 million soldiers. Now, at the last trumpet sound, a voice will proclaim that from this very moment, the whole earth is now officially part of the kingdom of heaven. But this isn't the end just yet. You see, blessed is the one who hears the words of this prophecy. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the revelation of things to come. The 2 greatest prophets will come when Jerusalem is given to the Gentiles. During this time, these 2 men dressed in sackcloth will prophesy for 3.5 years. They will spread absolute chaos with their ministry fueled with miracles. See, the whole world will utterly hate these 2. But the book of Revelation never reveals who they are. Now, what's very interesting is that there are only 2 people who were actually taken up to heaven. One person was Elijah, who ascended in a chariot of fire. His ministry was to rebuke a king and his false god. Now, the thing is, Elijah wasn't the first one to be taken up to heaven. The very first person who was taken up to heaven was actually Enoch. See, Enoch walked with God, and then he was not, because God took him. Now, in the actual story of Enoch, we hear of this mission where he has to deliver this message to the fallen angels. It was a message from God, pretty much telling them that they were going to hell. You see, both Enoch and Elijah had ministries where they literally stood up against the devil, but they were cut short after God took them up to heaven. And I wonder if they will come back as the 2 witnesses of the apocalypse. See, when the very first bowl is poured out on the earth, all those who have taken the mark of the beast will break out in these disgusting sores, while those who did not take the mark have to endure their absolutely foul smell. Now, when this second angel pours out this second bowl, 100% of the sea will turn into this dark red blood. Every creature in the water, big or small, will simply die, leaving the oceans entirely useless. Now this leads us to the third bowl. While people think it cannot possibly get any worse, suddenly all the fresh water and all the springs and all the rivers will also turn into blood, making water more valuable than diamonds. And then the fourth bowl gets poured, and the sun absolutely scorches the earth. Temperatures become inhospitable without anywhere to hide. In those days, people will blaspheme the name of God, even though he is the one who controls these plagues. But then comes the fifth bowl, which brings utter darkness to the kingdom of Satan. But this only leads to more anger, blasphemy, and rebellion. Now, when the sixth bowl gets poured out, the river Euphrates will completely dry up, making way for the kings of the east. These demons will deceive the whole world into gathering up for a great battle. They will join together to build this massive army to fight against God. And interestingly, these demons are described to look like frogs, kind of like an alien. But at the very last bowl, this mighty earthquake occurs, greater than anything the earth has seen before. Every city and every nation will simply disintegrate. And at this time, a great hail from heaven will fall upon a already destroyed earth. But the craziest part about all of this is that people will still not repent. They will still worship the beast, even as they are brought to their knees. So let this be a warning to anybody who hears the words of this prophecy. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the book of Revelation. This is how to survive the Great Tribulation. Okay, boom, the world's gone crazy. The first thing you're gonna wanna do is delete all social media.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Even today, there's nothing left that you can trust, not even me. There will come a time when this abomination of desolation will be standing in the holy place. The day that this happens, Jesus literally tells anybody in Judea to flee to the mountains. If you wanna survive the Great Tribulation, you're gonna have to move off the grid. And I know some of you guys think there's still enough time to repent, but no! No, there isn't. Ancient prophecies have been coming true left, right, and center. Guys, it is so obvious. Jesus is coming back. You have to be ready. There's this prophecy about these 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. The book of Revelation speaks of these horsemen who will bring chaos and disasters. And it all begins with a white horse who on its back has a rider with a bow. This specific horseman rides out with the goal of conquering and to conquer. Now recently, Paris hosted the 2024 Olympics, and during their opening ceremonies, people were absolutely shocked because what they saw was a rider on a metal horse running out on the water before these eerie wings appear right behind him. Now this is already weird, but then an actual white horseman comes out with the same angel wings. Right before, in the very next scene, this same horseman is now riding with all the nations of the world, with, again, those angel wings. People have also pointed out that they literally had a golden bull, like in the story of Moses. They also had this performance that strangely looks like the Last Supper painting. There's this great mystery about 144,000 people who will one day receive a mark from God on their foreheads. They are redeemed from the earth, ministers of the apocalypse. But these people must come from specifically the 12 tribes of Israel. See, it begins with 12,000 people from this tribe named Judah, which interestingly translates to praise or thankfulness. Another 12,000 people are marked from the tribe of Reuben, which actually means see a son. Then 12,000 are marked from the tribe of Gad, which means luck has come. Before another 12,000 are marked from the tribe of Asher, which means happy or blessed. And then 12,000 are marked from Naphtali, which means my struggle or wrestling. And then 12,000 from Manasseh, which means causing to forget. 12,000 from Simeon, which means heard. 12,000 from Levi, meaning attached or joined. 12,000 from Issachar, which means recompense or reward. 12,000 from Zebulun, which means dwelling or honor. Another 12,000 from the tribe of Joseph, which means he will add. Until finally, 12,000 are marked from the tribe of Benjamin, which actually means son of the right hand. But interestingly, if you translate all of their names together, you actually get these beautiful song lyrics. This is how it goes. Praise, see a son, luck has come, a true blessing. The struggle has caused us to forget, but if we hear him and join him, then there is reward. We shall dwell with him, and he will add to us the son of his right hand. there's these 4 angels bound under the great river Euphrates, and according to the Bible, they've been kept there for a very specific day. From that day, 1/3 of mankind will be exterminated in what seems like war and chaos, but this is where it gets super strange. See, this all comes from a vision seen by John the Apostle, and what he sees are these horses with riders spewing fire, smoke, and sulfur. But interestingly, these horses had tails like snakes, which John says could inflict certain injury. Now, this piques my curiosity because it sounds like technology that can be compared to something like a tank. This isn't an exact science, and all we can do is speculate. But you have to remember that 2,000 years ago, you couldn't just show people iPhones and helicopters. Things needed to be explained within the context of their time, and in my opinion, this is why we see this imagery of horses and riders, because something from the future needed to be explained to the past, and the book of Revelation is filled with this stuff. Images and prophecies that sound like pure fiction until you put it in the context of a modern civilization. I mean, try explaining to a man in the 1st century that we talk to magical beings in a magical box, yet we simply call this artificial intelligence. There are so many different views on the book of Revelation. So today, let's just go over the most popular theories, starting off with the pre-tribulation rapture. In this view, Jesus will come back before the great tribulation. In the blink of an eye, all those who are truly saved will be caught up in the clouds. They will enter into the afterlife before the horrors of the apocalypse begin on earth. Now, interestingly, the word rapture isn't actually mentioned in the Bible. I pulled out my study tool, and according to Haven, this is only a name that we've given to it. I really recommend you use this if you're ever confused on this stuff, because this still applies to the second view, which we call the post-tribulation rapture. In this view, Christians will have to go through tribulation. There will be a time of chaos, the likes of which this world has never seen before. Christians will have to endure evil and persecution before everything crescendos into the second coming of Christ in glory and power. But there's this other most curious view called post-millennialism, and in this view, almost the entire book of Revelation has already happened. The governments, the media, even history itself has been lying to us because the millennial reign of Christ has already ended. In this view, we would be living in what we call the little season, a time after the rapture when Satan has been released for one last time. In these days, he will gather up the whole world to fight in this war to end all wars. A dreadful day when Satan himself will command an army against God. Now, of course, this would never succeed. After all, the whole point wouldn't be to win, but rather to display one last fit of absolute rage. Because to the devil, this would simply be a final quest for self-destruction. After Jesus comes back down from heaven, he will actually set up this whole new kingdom. See, the Bible says that he will reign here for 1,000 years, while the devil himself is bound to the bottomless pit. But what's really strange is, after this 1,000 years, the devil has to be released one last time for a little while. See, these would be his very last days to cause chaos here on earth. So my question is, what would the devil even try to do? Well, after these 1,000 years, Satan will now try and deceive the nations into joining this massive army. The book of Revelation describes how they will gather up together to fight in the last battle ever. But now the question is, how would Satan possibly convince people to fight against Jesus? Well, there is this very mysterious conspiracy called Project Bluebeam. It's this idea that someday, someone will fake a supernatural event. But the reason why they would do this is to cover up the second coming of Jesus. See, in this theory, everything would lead up to the creation of a one-world religion. People will worship this beast that can perform signs and miracles. But as the nations willingly give themselves over to this beast, ultimately, it will lead them on a quest for self-destruction. Before Adam and Eve get kicked out of the Garden of Eden, they probably only ate fruits and vegetables. But my question is, what would this even do to a human body? Okay, well, first of all, fruits especially contain a bunch of sugar. Obviously, it's not like the processed stuff that we have today, but it's natural sugar nonetheless. See, these sugars are what we call carbs nowadays, and your body is obsessed with this stuff. So since Adam and Eve only ate fruits and vegetables, that means that their daily calories would have been up to 80% pure sugar. Sugar also gives you this thing called dopamine, which is literally the same chemical that people get from doing drugs. If they had a banana, an apple, pineapple, orange, a bunch of grapes, and berries in a day, then their daily intake would have been like 300 grams of natural sugar. That is literally 81 teaspoons of sugar, or like 11 slices of cake. But here's what just blows my mind. All of this would only be like 1,300 calories, which is still not enough to sustain a healthy body. It would have been unbelievably hard to get fat. Except here's the catch. If you and I ate nothing but fruits all day, it's very likely that you would just get super tired very quickly. Which now leaves me with this question. Along with full days of constant dopamine spikes, how often did Adam and Eve get tired? Because if my suspicions are right, then their life would have literally been filled with eating these dopamine-inducing fruits, followed by a most satisfying afternoon crash. The only thing they had to do now was take a nap. Everything just tastes like sugar with a little bit of banana.
If I eat another grape, I think I'm gonna crash out.
Did God really say you cannot eat from any tree in the garden?
No, what are you, stupid? We can't eat from that tree. God said we would die or whatever.
He's lying to you. If you eat it, you will become like God, knowing both evil and good. You will become a god.
Adam, look at this.
You shall certainly not die.
You shall certainly not die.
Nobody talks like that. You got no aura, fam.
Where'd you learn to talk like that? Lord of the Rings?
Matter of fact.
Oh! I'm so hungry though.
Wanna go to Wendy's?
Yeah, alright, bet.